What's happening, people? What's happening, folks? Welcome back to the channel, and welcome back to another Player in Focus video with your boy CJ from the Gunner's Corner. This is coming to you guys now following the second semifinals, which was Arsenal Football Club versus Atletico Madrid at the Metropolitano Stadium. And the result finished 1-1, as you guys know, for those who watched, for those who are not living under a rock and knew there was a semifinal taking place today. Arsenal Atletico Madrid 1-1 at their ground in a very hostile atmosphere, I should say. Um, Now, the player in focus we're talking about here is Julian Alvarez, right? And before we get stuck into this player, first of all, ladies and gentlemen, please remember to like and subscribe. It really, really, really does help us out as we are always looking to continue to grow and expand on the channel with plenty of content coming out. Obviously, not just, this season, not just the club season, right? Once the club season concludes, we're going to be rolling out content for the World Cup, live streams, vlogs, etc. So it's going to be exciting stuff to come. So lock in here with us, like and subscribe. Now, yes, as I mentioned, Julian Alvarez or Julian Alvarez, however you want to pronounce his name, whatever the correct pronunciation is, we'd have to fact check that actually. But nonetheless, Alvarez, right? Top player, top quality player. Um, and this man is a scary man, really and truly. He is a top quality player, world class, in my opinion, world class forward, world class striker, just of the highest quality. We saw that when he was in England with Man City. He's gone and made the move to Atletico Madrid, and he's got a whole host of clubs now that are in for him. You know what I mean? So this is the guy, again, as we just saw in this game against Arsenal, he just a player of again the highest quality, right? He's just got so much to his game, and scary prospect, scary player, 26 years of age, so about to hit his prime. Um, and a player that Arsenal Football Club, we could really do with him, really do with a striker of him. He would just fit us like a glove. And I mentioned yesterday, I think yesterday in the previous video I did with regards to Kvaratskhelia, the left winger, the Georgian left winger at PSG, how he would, slot in and fit like a glove in our team on that left wing. You're seeing again, just so far over the course of his career, Alvarez, the type of player he is, the profile he is, how he would slot in and be the perfect striker for Arsenal Football Club at this moment in time. He's exactly what we need, and before we get into why, right? Let's look at the player himself and his CV. The CV speaks for itself. Alvarez, despite the fact that, we know he signed for City, right? He came from Argentina and signed for City. Obviously, he's behind Erling Haaland, right? Erling Haaland is the best striker, one of the best strikers in the world. So that was always going to be a difficult feat, to come in and dispatch him. But, you know, nonetheless, I mean, despite being behind Haaland in the pecking order, Alvarez still managed 36 goals in 2 seasons in Manchester and was a crucial part of the treble-winning side, as we know, along with the Club World Cup win. That I think he won in that same year that they won the treble. And in that Club World Cup, he was awarded the man of the match. So we're talking about a Premier League winner. We're talking about a Champions League winner, an FA Cup winner, right? A treble winner, Club World Cup winner, who, like I said, man of the match in the Club World Cup. Um, a man who's won the World Cup, played alongside Messi, started in the final of the last World Cup. You know what I mean? Well, I believe he's won the Copa America as well with Argentina. Um, in his first season with Atletico Madrid, so obviously after, he made the move, which rightfully so, if you're playing behind Holland, he's too good to be, a bench player or sitting on the bench, right? Or to be in the shadow of another striker. So he made the move, obviously, um, a couple seasons ago now, um, after 2 years at Man City. And in his first season with Atletico Madrid, he scored 29 goals for Atletico and became an instant hit at the club, um, renowned for being a home to world-class hitmen is Atletico Madrid, obviously, because, they've had the likes of Griezmann and who's still there, Griezmann, Suarez, Diego Costa, Forlan, Falcao, etc. There's a couple others I'm probably missing. Fernando Torres, right? For a club like Atletico Madrid who signs, top level strikers and they've had world class forwards over the years. Alvarez, fit like a glove over there too in that sense, just comes in and, you know, and just another, top level striker that they've added to the ranks of strikers over the years. And again, like, in his first season, right, he hit a career high of 29 goals for Atletico Madrid. That just goes to show the quality, that he has once he was able to step out of the shadow of Erling Haaland. He goes on and does his thing. And this season, I mean, the goals have still continued flowing. Currently, he's up to, I believe, 19 goals for the season. And this is prior to today's game, mind you, in the Champions League semifinal against us, where he bagged the penalty in this game. So he's got 20 goals for the season now, um, nine of which have come in the Champions League. And again, make that 10 now because he did score the penalty in today's crucial game against us in the semifinals of the Champions League. And now again, you look at that, right? You hear those numbers, you look at that CV on paper, and again, you just think, well, wow, yeah, of course he's a top level striker. Those numbers speak for themselves, the goals, the trophies won up to this point in his career, and he's only 26 years of age. But we also watch football with our eyes, right? It's not just the statistics or the numbers on paper. It's not just the trophies won on paper. It's not, the amount of goals that he scored, and his conversion rate in, short periods of time. It's the fact that when you watch him, right? This is the beauty of watching football with your eyes. You watch him and he's just got everything, and especially he's just tailor-made to play for Arsenal Football Club. When you think that, he's got great spatial awareness, great movement. He's one of those strikers that, someone like myself who's played center back, you'd hate to play against because, he's not just gonna, he's not he moves, he floats around the pitch. He's not just, your sort of talisman, sorry, not talisman is the wrong word I'm looking for. He's not your sort of target man is the word I'm looking for. He's not your target man striker, like for example, an Olivier Giroud of the past. Those type of strikers who, they got great hold up play, right? But they're not moving you all over the pitch, right? They're not running off the shoulder. They're not dropping in deep. So strikers like Giroud, whilst he comes with his different qualities, he's not pulling defenders and center backs all over the place. But center backs, Julian Alvarez is a center back's nightmare because, like I said, when he drops in deep to receive the ball, you don't know whether to go with him or stay in position as a center back, right? Or he makes those runs in behind. Those that low center of gravity that he has, means that he's strong on the ball as well. So he could hold it up back to goal if needs be. He turns and runs at you. He's got quick feet. Very skillful, highly technically qualified player. Good feet, running at you. He's a nightmare. We saw it in this game, in the semifinal, right? In the first half, again, when Atletico had their backs to the wall, essentially, Arsenal dominated most of that first half um, of that game of the semifinal. And but there was a moment in the first half where Julian Alvarez, he gets the ball at the sort of the top of the 18 there, and just with a little bit of quick feet, gets the ball out of his feet, and has a snapshot, that Raya saves and he palms wide, thankfully. But again, that moment was from Julian Alvarez, creating that for himself. Um, like I said, he gets the ball and then sort of the top of the 18 there, and just a half chance fashions a shot for himself out of nothing, right? Wasn't created for him, right? He made that himself. And it's just also the amount of players that he drags towards him when he's on the ball, right? We've seen multiple times, in this game and in the first half where, he attracts Gabriel, Declan Rice, who's tracking back, Zubimendi, Saliba, all these players, because we know that he's a danger man and teams know that he's a danger man. So he attracts, three or four players towards him at times, just because of his quality and the ability that he has. You sometimes, you can't even just leave him one on one because again, that low center of gravity, those quick feet, able to shift left or right. He can pull players out of positions. Very hard forward to man mark just because that movement is so intelligent. You simply can't man mark him. So um, it's just for our team, and again, we have a striker currently in Gyökeres who scored a brilliant penalty in this game. Gyökeres did have a very decent game, I will say, for what we expect of him in his standards. But again, very different striker. Runs off the shoulder, needs balls in behind early. Not very good with the link up play. Doesn't have the best touch in the world. Not the most highly intelligent of footballers. Um, you know, complete opposite to what Alvarez is. But in an Arteta system, right, where we play, in a way where, everybody on the field essentially, needs to have that level of quality and IQ where I'm comfortable to give you the ball and you're technically secure with the ball, as I always say. You can protect the ball, you can secure it, you're not going to lose it because we have that, we play with such an element of control, so much so that, all players on the pitch, including our goalkeeper, including our fullbacks, need to be able to play with the ball at their feet, and you need to be able to trust them with the ball at their feet, and they need to be able to keep it and hold on to it. And again, Alvarez is just that. A lot of the times throughout Arteta's tenure as manager of Arsenal Football Club, we've played with strikers who, you know, um, can drop in and it can essentially can be false nines, right? Your Kai Havertz's, your Gabriel Jesus's, and even before that, he managed to do that with Lacazette. A striker who can drop in deep, come and collect the ball. Um, bring wingers into play, bring midfielders into play. We've seen that over Arteta's tenure so far. It's rare that he goes with an out and out gunman, hitman who's just a target man who's just a fox in the box like a Gyökeres. Which again, we've all mentioned this. There's theories been going around, and even from me, my belief has always been that Gyökeres was not an Arteta signing. Rather, Berto was the one that pushed for it. And I stand on that. And there have been reports coming out from the likes of Gunner Blog and so on, confirming this. We're starting to, and I think this will be revealed at the end of the season too. I think we'll know more about what happened last summer window and who was behind which signings and so on and so forth. Right? Obviously, while the season is still rumbling on, we need to fully, back the players, support the players, and not have any distractions coming out, and have the players, listen and hear any of the distractions, right? Because a player like Victor Gyökeres, whilst he divides opinion, we need to back him and support him from now till the end of the season, right? Um, so once the season is concluded, then people can start having their opinions and talk about this and talk about that, and we can hear stories about, what came out from last summer's window and how it all went down. That's not to be talked about now. However, as I mentioned, this is the first type of striker in Arteta's reign since he's been manager that is completely different to the type of profile that he's liked. And like I said, Kai Havertz, Jesus, players who can link up play, players who we trust to get on the ball, players who can press is another massive one. Um, and Alvarez is all of those things. He has the pressing ability. You don't play for Diego Simeone's side if you don't have the work rate, if you're not able to press, high energy, high tempo. Um, so another one of the probably the bigger reasons as to why Alvarez would fit in this team because again, as Arteta alluded to when talking about Eze not too long ago, you cannot play in this team, right? If you don't have that work rate and that ability to press, track back, etc. So, Alvarez, again, you don't need to, similar to Kvara, as I mentioned yesterday, it's not just about what he brings going forward, it's about the work rate that he has. Alvarez is the same thing. His work rate, his tenacity, um, he's tailor-made, tailor-made for Arsenal Football Club, with that alone, right? We've seen players sign for this club or play under Mikel Arteta for less, right? For not even necessarily having quote unquote technical quality as a forward, but your work rate is good enough to get you in the team. Martinelli, you're a winger, you're a forward who has great work rate and tracking back and defensive mindset. You're in the team. Not necessarily because you can score 20 goals a season, but your work rate on that left wing, brilliant. I love that stuff. And this is me talking for Mikel Arteta here, right? I'm sort of quoting him when I say this. So. Yeah, Alvarez is the same. He absolutely is the same in that sense. So forget what he can do going forward as a striker. But if for so long as you have that work rate, that pressing ability, and that defensive mindset and the IQ to drop in and defend, you're good enough to play for Mikel Arteta. You know, but that's not why we would want him in the team, right? As Arsenal fans, we want him in the team for his brilliance. I did another video not too long ago, again talking about Eze and talking about match winners and talking about players who create something out of nothing and players who, you know, aren't controlled or Arteta, quote unquote. And Arteta meaning, you don't you can play with the handbrake off. You play with that, that moment of magic, that individual brilliance that a manager cannot coach. That's exactly what Alvarez, can do and what he has in his locker. Again, like I said, in games like this where, you know, the whole team just doesn't look like scoring. It doesn't look like the goal is going to come from, sort of a collective, a team effort, right? But Alvarez, that individual who just has that moment. We saw that moment in the semifinals, sorry, the quarterfinals when Atletico played Barcelona. That beautiful free kick that Alvarez hit at the Camp Nou. We saw what a brilliant attempt at goal that was. An attempt converted into a goal, right? The first like it was at the Camp Nou, Barcelona versus Atletico in the last round. You know, Alvarez hits an unbelievable free kick that goes into the back of the net from distance. That's another thing that he has in his locker too that we're not talking about, right? The set pieces. He had a free kick in this game against us in the second half that went just wide of the post. You know, shaved the side of the mesh just past David Raya's post, if you guys recall that in the second half. And then obviously he scores a penalty, right? So what Gyökeres did so brilliantly, and what we know Gyökeres can do, the way he hits a football, right? Beautiful taken penalty in the first half, past the All Blacks goal. Gyökeres strikes it, and we know one thing for sure about Gyökeres is that he's you know absolutely solid from penalty and dead ball situations from 12 yards out. Alvarez saw that and said, I can do one better. I'll go one further. And Alvarez, in the second half steps up, hits a penalty in a similar area with the same level of pace and velocity. David Rice planted has no chance. So we know Alvarez, can also convert from dead ball situations, whether it's set piece, whether it's penalties. He's just a brilliant all-around footballer. He really is. And again, his technical quality, you give him the ball and you just trust him. You trust him to either make a play, right, whether that's make a pass, whether he can carry the ball and travel with it and dribble, beat two, three players, hit the ball from outside the 18, hit the ball, you score from inside the box in the box if needs be. He knows where to be as well. It's just that all-around game, right? That brilliance, that makes him just perfect for Arsenal Football Club, you know. Another striker is similar to that, not to go too off topic, but another striker similar to that, that would have been perfect for this Arsenal setup was an Alexander Isak, who the fans at least all wanted last summer. We loved the idea of him because similar profile, right? He can drift left, he can drift right. Again, he can get on the ball, he can drive through the middle of the pitch on the ball, technically secure, very, very skillful, and a decent finishing return. Um, all those things is what Alvarez has. He's just a shorter, less lankier version of an Alexander Isak, but Alvarez has literally all those things. And like I said, his height clearly wasn't a problem. He's come to England and he's done it. He's played in the number 10 position or a second striker position behind Holland in Pep's system. You know, very, very highly intelligent player. Can come here and to Arsenal Football Club and do the same, right? Back to goal, strong because of that low center of gravity back to goal, can keep the ball with the defender on his backside. You know, it's just talking about it, right? All these things, all his qualities, everything that he can bring to the table. Again, I don't want to get too ahead of myself because what if it doesn't happen? What if we don't sign him? I mean, we've been linked, and these links, are they credible links? Are they coming from fans pushing the agenda out and saying this is who we should get in the summer? Is it from, you know, Berta's camp? Is it coming from, like I said, just other journalists who are just trying to put stories out there? It's a thing, right? So where there's smoke, there's fire, they say sometimes, right? When you hear these rumors, when you hear these stories, you want to assume that they're real, they're credible because they must have come from somewhere. So one to watch out for in the summer, and let's hope for the best because I think it's all it's very clear that we do need a an upgrade. Once again, in our center forward position, it's another position that we've been struggling with over the years. And Arteta likes Kai Havertz, and I mean I like Kai Havertz, right? But Kai Havertz, for all the brilliant things that he does when he links up play and he moves and creates space and, you know, runs in behind, he's not a clinical finisher. Whereas, you know, Gyökeres, clinical finisher, very clinical finisher, but he lacks all the other things. All those other things that Kai Havertz has, in terms of link up, in terms of, spatial awareness, footballing IQ, link up play, passing ability, even touch and technique. Gyökeres lacks all those things, but he's a clinical striker, so he's a limited striker in that sense. So you combine a Kai Havertz and a Gyökeres, then you get someone like a Julian Alvarez, right? Then you get a world-class striker, right? Those are world-class strikers are a combination of clinical finishing and all-around game, whether it's link-up play, hold-up play, running in behind, spatial awareness, first touch, technique, dribbling, like the lot, you know. Alvarez has all of it and maybe just doesn't have the height, but he's shown that clearly you don't need that, right? Messi doesn't have the height either, to give the most extreme examples, but we're talking about the best player in the world in Lionel Messi's case. So the height wouldn't be a thing. We've seen Alvarez score headed goals too as well in his time in England. Just an overall, complete forward, complete center forward, complete striker. You know, Probably some would say the modern day mold of an Aguero, his fellow Argentinian compatriot there. Similar type of profile of striker, right? Low center of gravity, very skillful, very good technique, clinical, strong. right? Hard to mark, hard to track, and how successful was Aguero in England and in world football. So there you have it, people. Julian Alvarez, top striker, somebody who should be on our radar this summer if he is available. Do we have the funds and the investment and the financial capacity to go for him? That's yet to be seen. We're not so sure what the funds yet are looking like this summer. We'll see. We'll have more reports as we get close towards the end of the season and as the season wraps up. Um, so we'll see what we look to do in the summer, and if we do choose to prioritize a striker like a Julian Alvarez, that would be the ideal striker. Let's not get our hopes up. This is Arsenal Football Club at the end of the day. We'll wait and see what Berta and the team have in store. For now, we have a season to finish and to wrap up, whilst we're still fighting for the two most important trophies in the game that we can fight for as a football club. The title race in the Premier League and the Champions League. Few games away from glory in both those competitions. So can we do it? Can we get over the line? Let's see. And we will be there to cover it all. So people, this has been CJ from the Gunners Corner. Make sure to like and subscribe. As I always say, we're here for you, putting out content daily. Just make sure you're tapped in and locked in for all the exciting stuff to come, and we will continue to deliver. So, with that being said, people, this has been your boy CJ from the Gunners Corner. Like and subscribe. We'll see you on the next one. We're out. Bye bye.